the relationship between trust and conflict is really misunderstood. How do we deal with the hard things in the world? I am responsible for the things I can 100% control: my feelings, my thoughts, and my behaviors. Accountability is the things that I have to answer for. Humans need and want to matter, but we matter most because we are in relationships. And that's where we need other people to come to us and say, you made a difference in my life. Anger is an opportunity to connect at a deeper level. And authentic anger is one of the last barriers to intimacy. I'm who I am today because people have struggled with me instead of against me. As humans, we're destined to struggle. The only question is, how are we going to struggle? So let's struggle together.
Hello and welcome to the Differentiation podcast. My name is Michèle Sorgaroli and I'm your host, and we are being joined today by Nate Regier. I am so excited about this conversation. Nate is a leadership champion. He is a former psychologist, an adjunct professor, an author 4 times over, I might add, and an entrepreneur. And he is passionate about balancing the tension between relationships and results. Nate believes that conflict can spark something better. And as co-founder and CEO of Next Element, he helps leaders build thriving workplace cultures through adaptive communication, integrity, and compassionate accountability. There's some really interesting words in there that I want to explore with you, Nate. Thank you for being here today.
Yes, I'm delighted to. There is a lot to unpack in there, Michelle, and it's
Right?
it's such a joy to be with you. Thank you.
Oh, this is fun. Thank you so much. Yeah, lots of big words, lots of deep meaning words, lots of discussion, like words that talk about trust. So I kind of wanted to start there. In past conversation that we had, you shared with me an interesting stat that that stuck with me, and you said that out of 400 definitions of trust that you had explored, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, roughly only 2% mentioned conflict, and that really stood out for you as it did for me. Did I get that right, more or less?
You did actually. This is part of research that we conducted this earlier this year, asking people about their experience and definition of conflict from a lot of different angles.
Mm.
And we were just shocked to see among almost 400 people, only 2% of their definitions included conflict somewhere in the trust equation.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that. Like you said, conflict sparks something better. And certainly trust has got to be inside that when you're balancing relationships, results, and this tension. Help
Yeah.
me understand from your perspective more about the relationship with tension and conflict and
Mm,
trust.
mm.
Interesting dynamic there.
Yeah, trust is anyone who's in the professional development
Mm,
space, coaching space. Trust is one of the biggest themes that we work with, and we know that
mm,
it's so important for innovation, for psychological safety, for teams to function. But two things that we've seen and
mm.
experienced over the 20 years that we've been working with leaders is people's relationship with conflict is fraught. It really is. And the second thing we've seen is that the relationship between trust and conflict is really misunderstood. And so that's what we've been unpacking recently. And so just briefly, we most people have negative associations with conflict.
Mm.
And when we ask them to talk about it, what are your experiences? Usually what they describe is when conflict has gone bad.
Mm.
And we call that drama. Um,
Oh,
we
that's
call
beautiful.
positive conflict compassion, accountability, and we'll get into that later. But negative conflict is drama. And to quote one of my favorite drama researchers, Cy Wakeman, she's amazing. She defines drama as any behavior that moves energy away from relationships and results. So that's the kind of conflict most people have experienced. And so they don't like it. They don't want
Mm.
to be part of it. They don't want to have that energy, or they're
Yeah.
repeating habits and patterns that they learned, even though they're not proud of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a great reframing because it's interesting. Conflict is a word that is, talked about a fair bit. People want to
Mhm.
avoid conflict or they want harmony. But the interesting thing around reframing for me is this idea between conflict and drama,
Mhm.
where drama is, we all think of drama as being less productive. But saying that it's behavior that moves us away from relationships and results, that's what you said, I think, right? Behavior that
Yeah.
moves us away.
Yeah.
Um, and seeing conflict as something that actually is generative, that is creative,
Yeah.
or it can create when
Yeah.
approached in a healthy way. Um, so I'm curious about this because I wanted to take you back as we're exploring this relationship that you have and these belief systems that you have around conflict and trust and all of that happening. When did you start to develop this interest? Like, I'm
Yeah.
curious about
Yeah.
where did this, you started out, you were a
Yes.
psychologist first, right? A trained psychologist. And then you moved into professor. I'm not quite sure what your journey looked like, but I
Yeah.
would imagine it started with psychology or maybe even before that.
Well, okay. So since we're in Wicked season and sequels and prequels season,
Oh, yeah,
I'm going to
nicely
share
done.
with you, I'll tell you really quick our current logic model and philosophy about conflict, but then I want to take you back
Okay,
to answer your
perfect.
question.
Yeah,
So our logic model is this: diversity, differences of any kind are part and parcel of a thriving universe, a thriving ecosystem, a thriving environment, a thriving biology. We know that without diversity, things would just come to a halt. We need it.
mm, hmm,
However, diversity is the root of all conflict. So there would be no conflict if people weren't different, if people didn't have different views, beliefs,
right.
values, things they cared about. So
Hmm.
what that invites logically, then conflict is simply the energy product of diversity. Now, the real question is, how are we going to spend that energy? And that's where humanity has choices to make. And that's where being human comes into the equation. We're naturally different. We didn't pick that.
Yeah,
Now there's energy that's generated from the conflict of our differences. The question is, how are we going to steward that energy? How are we going to use that energy? Drama is one way. Drama is the destructive use of conflict energy. And the other
right.
way is what we have discovered and developed and what I've spent my lifetime trying to solve for. And
Mm,
that takes me back to the beginning. I was born into a Mennonite family, which is a Protestant denomination very known for peace, nonviolence, pacifism,
mm, mm.
service, living by example. And my parents are missionaries in Africa.
No conflict there.
Yeah, no conflict there. So I grew up
Mm,
being told always turn the other cheek, never resort to violence. You never hurt anybody, no matter what. And I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'3". I got tall pretty big. And so in a lot of situations growing up, if push came to shove, I could probably prevail physically. But
right.
the message in my head was never, 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 never hurt anybody. And so just take it, take it, take it. And that was
Mm,
difficult for me to deal with. Then we moved to Africa, and I spent my high
wow.
school years in the 80s in South Africa, where apartheid was still the regime in South Africa. And Nelson Mandela was in prison, and I'm seeing racism at very large scale, institutionalized.
Yeah.
And so things were just not clicking for me. And I was like, I get that we want to treat everybody as, nicely, but
Yeah.
we have to deal with the behaviors.
I'm curious if things were just not clicking for me. What did you mean by that?
I couldn't reconcile this pacifism as turn the other cheek, never do harm to anybody, never hurt anybody. But how do we deal with the hard things in the world? How do we
Right.
talk about this? It's not okay for this to happen. How do we
Right.
address issues of injustice and inequality? And how do we talk about that um, without violence, without disrespect? And of course, anyone who's a mature, probably Mennonite, would have told me as a little child, "Wait till you grow up. It's not that simple. It's not that black and white." But it was something that I struggled with.
Of course. Yeah. So you grew up with this very acute experience of the polar opposites of passive and violent,
Mhm.
right? And you were trying to reconcile those as a young person, which is probably interesting as you're finding your way today,
Yeah.
learning to have
Yeah. I mean, I
reconciled those.
experienced compassion without accountability, which was just passivity and niceness, or accountability without compassion, which is just violence and cruelty.
Okay.
And those were what I saw. And I thought neither of these are okay. These are not sustainable. It's not how we should be living.
So, for us to better understand and nuance further a little bit, when you speak about compassion and accountability, when you say compassion, what are you speaking to? What does that mean?
Yes. Well, I address this in my book, wherever I can point to it here, Compassion Accountability. There's 5 chapters at the end dedicated to the 5 misconceptions and myths about compassion that I grew up believing.
Ah.
And for example, that compassion is soft, that compassion is for bleeding hearts, that compassion is something you just have. You can't learn it. You're just a compassionate person. That compassion is about alleviating suffering. Just take away the pain. And even today, the most prominent definition of compassion out of Stanford and is empathy in action to alleviate suffering. And that is
Hmm.
such a restrictive definition. It is not an empowering definition. And it leads to so many myths and misconceptions about what compassion really is. And that's what I thought compassion was. And that's why I saw it as antithetical to accountability.
Oh, interesting. That's curious. Now, I understand. I want to come back to accountability in just a second, but if we can hang out here for a moment. Um, from my perspective, my understanding, and I'm not as researched or studied on this as you are by any stretch. Compassion to the Latin root means calm, which means with, doesn't it? With passion and passion, doesn't that mean suffering in the Latin root?
That was the epiphany for me.
Tell me more.
What you just shared is when I understood that definition, it all made sense for me. Compassion is with suffering. It's
Mm.
not taking away the suffering. It's not making other people suffer. It's not suffering instead of other people. It's suffering together. And I remember when I saw that movie, Mel Gibson made the movie The Passion of the Christ. And it was a movie all about just there's been 100 movies made about this historical figure and religious
Mhm.
figure, but this one was all about the suffering. And passion is the other half of the word compassion. And so it all started to click with me. It's like, wait a second. So compassion isn't about just getting rid of all the suffering. It's about
Mhm.
struggling together. And so that
Yeah.
means that conflict has to somewhere be in there. Conflict
Yeah.
can destroy us. That's in our nature.
Hmm.
But conflict also has the opportunity to create. The purpose of conflict is to create. And that was something I discovered with a mentor in my second book, Conflict Without Casualties. But once it kind of clicked that the purpose of conflict is to create and that compassion means to struggle together, it all came together. That compassion
Right.
and conflict are like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Well, it's, I've often reflected on this as well in that passion, because in life, we're all, follow your passion and the money will come and, do what you're
Yeah.
passionate about. And what are you passionate about? And
Yeah.
passion is wrapped up with this joyful, angelic energy and that's how we use it. But in fact, when we genuinely, truly have a passion, it's it's in suffering too, right? We suffer through our
Yeah.
passion because we're looking
Yeah.
for answers and there's pain in the discovery, or that's how I'm
Yeah.
processing it anyway. Does that resonate?
I love what you said. That does resonate because we define passion as suffering, or we define passion as just commitment. I really love this.
Yeah.
I'm a passionate whatever. I'm passionate about this. This is
Hmm.
my passion. I'm following my passion. Well, if you really care about something, you're willing to hurt for it. You're willing to work for it. You're willing to struggle for it. You're willing to suffer for it. So I think
Yeah.
that's where the two come together is don't call yourself passionate unless you're willing to hurt for it.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a baby. When you want a
Mm,
baby,
yeah.
you
Well, and
gotta
that's
hurt,
the interesting thing.
right?
One of the reasons why the pain of childbirth is survivable and tolerable is because there's purpose, and
Yeah,
because
that's right.
there's an end, there's a goal. It
Yeah.
accomplishes something amazing. Passion is like that. It's suffering and struggling for a purpose, for a greater good.
Right. And I think that's the thing is when we are struggling, when you see, and these words we've used before in a past conversation, craftsmanship, when you see craftsmen really mastering their craft, there's a lot of emotional turmoil. There's a lot of consist. discipline around that through the pain and the suffering of whatever it is that they're trying to become masterful at because they're passionate
Yeah.
about it, right? I see that all the
Yeah.
time.
My brother is a great example of what you just described. And he grew up in the same world that I did.
Uh-huh.
But he's 8 years older and he's got a different personality than me. And he is very, very committed to the things he believes in, very
Mm,
passionate. And I see the angst, I see the toil, I see the turmoil. And I also see the struggle with sometimes being passionate means you're not popular, you don't take the easy route, you stand out because you're different, but you also fight for it. And sometimes people don't see in the moment the vision you're trying to manifest. And
mhm.
so it's hard in the moment because you struggle and you fight, and people just expect you to take the easy route or do what's popular, or do what everyone's doing.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
absolutely. In my work, certainly in differentiation, that's a big part of differentiation because you've got this
Yes.
inner turmoil around people who, and I'm still going to come back to accountability, by the way, I haven't forgotten for a minute. But this inner turmoil around differentiation where we are um, wanting to express in a way that makes us unique. And I see this with clients all the time where there's hesitancy because they feel like they may be rejected, maybe alone, unpopular in their approach or their style because it's not the way things are done generally by others in the same industry, for example. They might be pushing a status quo or innovating and creating a different way, which is bringing discomfort to an industry, for example. And the level of comfort that one has around the angst and the toil and the turmoil, it must be purposeful because there's no other reason for doing it,
Yeah.
right? For being
Yeah.
isolated. I would imagine you see that with your leaders as well, do you? When they're struggling with trying to create or innovate, be different, the resistance they
We,
feel.
yeah, we see two things, and it's true in our own company, it's true in my own life, and it's true with the leaders that we work on. There's the there's this connection to something bigger than yourself and a connection to something that's vulnerable within yourself.
Yeah.
And both of those are scary. Both of
Yeah.
those are vulnerable. Both of those require hard work. And sometimes we have to go in and sometimes we have to go out to find that balance. And
Hmm.
our team goes back and forth.
Hmm.
Right before COVID, our team decided we need to revisit our why, our purpose, our mission.
Mm.
It's been a while, and let's make sure
Mm.
we're on track. And this is really why we want to get up every day. And we got really clear about that, refined it. Little did we know 3 months later, COVID would hit and everything would be thrown in turmoil. That's what kept us going. That was our true north, and it's what kept us
Hmm.
going through it all. And we did the right thing. We
Hmm.
made good choices, and we didn't pivot away from our true north and from
Right.
who we were. And we look back on that now when other things happen. It's like we can do this. We can do hard things.
Right. That sense of purpose really is a grounding agent because I've seen this over and over as have you. When we have that clarity around what we want or where we're trying to get to, it makes it all worthwhile
Yeah,
because we don't feel like we're floating or in a make work project or putting ourselves at risk without a reason,
yeah,
right? We're serving something bigger than ourselves and connecting to something that's deeply meaningful within allows us to find the space to stand
yeah.
in that discomfort and be either inspired from within or pulled forward by something out bigger than ourselves, if you will.
I'm sometimes jealous, envious of serial entrepreneurs. They have this knack for just creating value and then walking away and then doing it again and again and again. That's insane. I have a relative that can do this. But I have to care about what I'm doing. It has to be part of who I am, and there has to be continuity over time. So
Mm.
maybe I'm just an entrepreneur, not a serial one.
Yeah. Well, it can be for sure, right? Like their purpose for creating these entrepreneurial enterprises, if you will, their purpose may be, I want to put this impact out into the world, but
Yeah,
I don't need to be the one driving it. I just want to
Yeah.
create that, put that impact out there, and then move on and do it again. Have an
I mean,
impact
look
out
at
here.
Shark Tank. These are all serial entrepreneurs. They're buying
Amazing.
companies,
Yeah.
but when they all have boundaries, and usually those boundaries have to do with their values, that this
Yeah.
product has to be in line with my
Yes.
overall purpose.
Exactly.
So,
Aligned
okay,
in.
I guess I could be a serial entrepreneur.
You probably could, as long as we're aligned. Okay, so we've talked about compassion. We've talked about this idea. Now you mentioned accountability and these two
Yeah.
different ends of the spectrum here. So let's talk about accountability in your world. And what does accountability mean as a starting point?
Well, it's another word we throw around like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we need to hold people accountable. You're not accountable. We need to step up our accountability. One of the things that we're very careful about in our company is definitions of terms and operationalizing terms so that we all know what we mean. And yeah, sometimes we invent new ways of defining terms. Sometimes we go back to the Latin root, but we just need to be clear about what we mean. And I want to distinguish accountability from responsibility. Very different words. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Responsibility is that which I have control over. And I am responsible for the things I can 100% control. And there are only three things: my feelings, my thoughts, and my behaviors. That's the only things that I'm responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
And so this may extend to my job description. My job description says these are the things I got to do. I'm responsible for those things because I have 100% control over them, and they're all dependent on my thoughts, my feelings, and my behaviors. That's not where conflict comes in. Conflict comes in accountability. Accountability is different. Accountability is the things that I have to answer for, but I might not be responsible for them. If I'm the CFO of an organization, I am accountable for the financial performance of the organization, but I'm not responsible for the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors
Mm-hmm.
that generate those numbers every day. But I have
Mm-hmm.
to account for them. So this brings up the whole issue of how does a CFO influence the numbers? Conflict. They have to connect with the people who are responsible for generating those numbers, and they have to have those conversations. They have to communicate it. They have to talk about it. um, so a CFO can say, well, I'm 100% responsible for putting together the spreadsheet that I share with my board. I do that, but I'm not responsible for any of the stuff that contributed to those numbers. So I think as a leader, we become accountable now, and that's a whole different game. And that requires that we have conversations and relationships
Mm-hmm.
and conflict so that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors influence other people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that get the results.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I've heard something similar around the responsibility and accountability nuance, and I think we often think of accountability so differently. For me personally, I always think of the interesting thing about accountability, just to bring in another element, if we can, is around sense of duty, where I see, for me, accountability, if we feel like we're accountable to something that is a sense of duty or a something we have to do versus something that we choose to do, I think is a very curious nuance, because being
Mm,
accountable, so we always joke about this in my household. I don't like holding anybody accountable. I'm not a good accountability partner, because I kind of figure if you don't want to do it, that's okay. I'm not here to try to make
yeah.
you do something you don't want to do. So I always speak about accountability as, particularly in my business, and perhaps quite likely in yours as well. In coaching, a lot of accountability comes up a lot. I need someone to
Yeah.
hold me accountable, right? I'm like,
Right.
oh, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to hold you accountable. I want you to hold yourself as accountable. Right?
Yeah.
I want you to be inspired and want to do it. I want you
Mm-hmm.
to feel the pull forward about something that's important, so that
Yeah.
you are accountable to yourself as opposed
Yes.
to accountable to me. How does that fit in your world with leaders and the
Yeah.
people that they lead?
Um, Well, using what the framing you just gave, I might say that responsibility is the things I do on my own accord. I hold myself accountable for my responsibilities. Accountabilities are things I do because someone else is dependent on me. Someone else needs me. I'm in a relationship. And I think this gets to the notion of mattering. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how much you're familiar with this, but I'm really curious about this lately is humans need and want to matter.
Mm-hmm.
We matter, of course, because we're human, but we matter most because we are in relationships. And so accountability comes in when people depend on each other and need each other.
Yeah.
And so on our team, we talk about this a lot. We have a system of accountabilities. We all have metrics that we have to account for, behaviors we account for every week. We can on our own accord decide how we're going to do them, but once a week I have to say, did I do it for you, for the team, and for our mission? Because that's why I'm doing it. It's not because I necessarily want to. There's many days I don't want to do that, but I do it because I matter and because my contribution makes a bigger difference and because those people are going to ask me on Monday and I don't want to let them down. Not because they're going to make me feel guilty or I'm going to be ashamed of
Mm-hmm.
myself. I don't want to let them down because we matter and we're in a relationship that's making a bigger difference than our individual selves. To me, that's where accountability really starts to come in.
I love that. Because what you're saying there is, um, yes, it's my, people are relying on me, but I want to do this because my work matters and I'm connected to the contribution that I'm making, and I know that it makes a difference. So there's something about there's the passion again, the compassion you have,
Yeah.
right? Coming forward and really leaning in because we are connected to the meaning and the importance of our work in the context of something bigger,
Yeah.
not just for ourselves, but for the
No,
contribution that it
no.
makes. And we're connected to that. That's really what you're speaking to here, I think. Is that what I'm hearing?
I really am. I really am. And this idea of holding someone accountable is such an adversarial
Right?
feel to it rather than, well, and this is where it gets into our definition of compassionate accountability involves more than just accountability. It also involves human value and human capability. So
Mm,
we are valuable, we are capable agents, but we are also responsible because we live in relationships and we depend on each other. So when people say, well, I've held them accountable and their performance has not changed, now what do I do? And I ask them, have you held them valuable? And have you held them
yeah.
capable? Because you have to also expect those things to be true about people before you can hold them accountable. You have to see them as worthy human beings and you have to see them as capable of contributing to the solutions that affect their lives, and
Mhm.
invest in them. If you haven't done those two things, don't bother with accountability.
Yeah, and to some extent, I think that I mean, we always work harder when we feel like we're worthy, we're being valuable to
Yeah,
who we're contributing to, and we have a connection to the contribution of our work and feel like
totally.
I always like to say we feel valuable and we feel valued, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
think we tend to hold ourselves accountable. We don't need anyone else to do that because
Yeah.
it just feels good to be valuable and valued.
Well, and there's two kinds. There's extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, and they're both important.
Right.
Leaders that are very, very self-driven, they're very self-motivated. They're like they work hard. They get up every day. You don't have to tell them. You don't have to do anything. They're going to do their job. Those self-driving, these driven leaders are responsible. You reward them, and they say, "I don't need a reward. I don't need you to praise me. I don't need some fanfare. I'll do it
Right.
anyways." Here's what I ask them though: what if you never saw the evidence that
Yeah.
your work made a difference? And they're like, what do you talk about? It's like, well, let's say you work every day to try to make a process more efficient. What if you never knew the stats on whether that process was quicker? What if you teach children because you want to make an impact in their lives and you never got to see a student grow up?
Mhm.
And then you see it hit them. It's like, I don't need praise. I need to just know that I matter. I need to see
Right.
the evidence. And it doesn't have to come in the form of a party. And that's where we need other people to come to us and say, you made a difference in my life. Or did you know that we're saving 10 minutes off of every hour because of that new system that you put in place? Or did you know that because you made coffee before everybody came, people were more comfortable, they opened up, and we learned something about the client that we never would have known?
Right. Amazing. Yeah, it's really leaning into that sense of awareness with people's humanity. Okay, so this question's been lingering for me, and I feel like it's appropriate to ask it now, if I may. So, where I want to go with this, Nate, is where is this coming from? Where is your passion for this tension in between conflict and results, if you will, and relationships? Where is it coming from for you?
Externally, it's a product of all the things I've been through, a product of my upbringing, a product of my parents, my family, my community, the things I've learned along the way, my mentors, um, kind of coming together and merging over time. Internally, a lot of it has to do with the evolution of my own personality. So at the time that I formed Next Element, started Next Element, I was much more entrepreneurial, go-getter, action, action, let's go, let's take the bull by the horns, let's go
Mm,
make $1 million. I still had solid values, but it was all about the show.
mm,
Then
mm,
I some things changed inside of me and I became much more focused on the accountability around metrics and measurement. And I had a lot of training in clinical psychology, behavioral assessment, measurement outcomes. That's why our company is so diligent about all these things we talk about that feel so soft. Everything we do is measurable. They're all observable, measurable behaviors so that we can hold ourselves accountable for whether behavior is actually changing. And our clients can hold us accountable for whether we're delivering the long-term impact that they're asking for. So then in the more recently in the last 3 or 4 years, you probably noticed how emotional I get talking about the things I care about. You would have never seen that from me 5 years ago
mm,
or 10 years
mm,
ago. So I think it's partly my age and where I'm looking to the future to leaving a legacy, but I
mm.
think it's partly the evolution of my personality, that the heart part of me is starting to come forward and balance out the two. So compassion and accountability are coming together much more within me,
Mhm.
in my daily experience of life and the way I look at the future and the way I look at the way where our company goes and what difference we want to make. So that's a long answer to your question. I don't know if
Yes.
that
No, it's
triggers
beautiful.
anything
Thank you.
or,
It did a little bit. You know, you were speaking with a lot of passion, actually, a lot of energy. I'm just going to use that word. A lot of energy when you were talking about having observable and measurable results so that people know that your work is making a difference. And what was coming up for me was this sense of I matter. I'm making my contribution is
yeah,
making a difference. And so your sense of wanting to know that your contribution matters, that and coming back to where's the evidence, some kind of feedback, whatever that looks like, some kind of feedback that tells me that I'm both valued and valuable in through my work. I'm curious about um, where's that coming from? Was there a time in your life, an experience or a phase or a period where you weren't getting the kind of feedback that's so important to you now that made this I matter or my
yeah.
contributions make a difference sort of bubble up?
Again, it's about the evolution of my personality, and the framework for personality that we use with our clients and with ourselves is called the process communication model, and it's a very psychologically based behavior model. So it helps unpack the answers to these questions.
Mm,
Early in my life, I was motivated by incidents, which is a lot of excitement in a short period of time. I played tennis. I did lots of risky things. I was on the edge all the time.
ah,
But what was right next for me was the part of me called the thinker part, which is very much motivated by recognition of work, getting things, good things done, doing productive work, and solving problems. And so the transition from that one part to the other happened in a very important moment in my life, which is actually when I proposed to my wife. A very significant thing changed inside of me. And literally the next day, I started making lists and caring about data. It was the most crazy thing. So that's been the last 20 years, 30 years of my
wow,
life. So for me, then that's what I wanted to matter by solving problems and measuring it. So of course that influenced the company and the things that we do.
right.
More recently, though, some other things have changed within me, and now it's more about the heart, and I'm more
Yeah.
motivated by just being valuable as a human being and being in relationships that are life-giving. Now, I bring with me all the positive qualities of those things, but the motivation comes from different places now. Um,
Yeah. It's interesting you've brought up age, and I think we do soften over time. That's why grandparenting I hear is so much
Right?
so much
Right?
more fun. I'm still waiting, but um, the thing that I'm noticing though is what I'm curious about is I think that does happen as we age, we soften and we do become more heart forward, if you will, or more heart balanced or sensitive to that part of ourselves. What happens when you're dealing with a younger leader who's not in that phase of life yet, where that part of them isn't yet awakened?
Yeah.
How do we help those people connect with that heart balance when they're still,
Yeah.
in the incident phase of running on the
Yeah.
edge all the time and out to make $1 million and
Well, the good news is the phase of life is not connected to phase of personality.
mm,
And so I meet young leaders every single day that are their personality structure is different. They are in their
mm,
hearts right now. And I mean, there's six different personality types. We all have all six in us, and any one of them could be primary at a particular time. And so
mm,
I'm connecting with young leaders every day. Some are very heart led, some are very much just mechanical, some are very much, they have big aspirations and visions for
mm.
for values. I'm meeting ones that are just living in the moment, having a blast, and act like they don't care about anything except for what
Yeah.
happens next. They're all there, and it's not
Hmm.
about age. It's not about maturity, and it's not about intelligence. So I get to meet people where they are and nurture that part of
Hmm.
who they are and help it be a contribution to the bigger picture, which is diversity.
Mm.
So I'm a big believer in personality diversity. I think there's something much deeper that we're not paying
Hmm.
attention to that we should be, that is driving a lot of the things that we at the surface we label as other kinds of diversity when it's not.
When you say there's something about diversity that we're not tapping into, wasn't quite your language, what are you speaking to?
I think personality diversity is something we're not talking enough about, because it is such a massive driver of the way we show
Mm.
up, the way we process information, what motivates us, what we care about, what we value, and the way we glitch out in distress. And because it influences all of those things, why aren't we talking about it? Because it is one of the number one drivers of conflict in the workplace is personality differences. There's diversity. So everybody does assessments and we give labels to these things and then we move on. Like, so now what? So what? How are we going to talk to each other differently now? How are we going to arrange our workplaces and write emails and do incentive systems to actually accommodate and nurture the diversity of personality that's in the room?
Hmm. Diversity of personality. And, I'm kind of, we talked about inside and outside. We've talked about this a few times here. And you said six parts of a personality. I think that's what you said. Is that right? Six
Yeah,
parts?
there's lots of personality models. The one I referred to identifies six distinct personality types. They're
Okay.
all in each of us. We all have all six, but they're arranged in a preferred set order. And that's
Uh-huh.
what gives us our uniqueness.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the interesting. So inside of ourselves, we have that already,
all
that
six.
built-in diversity, right?
It's types in people, not types of people.
Right.
So most
Hmm.
people talk about, well, you're a this, you're a that, you're a high D, you're an introvert. No, you're not. You're a human being. And we all have all these in us. And so when I realize that inside of me is all the same types that are inside of you, but maybe in a different order, what that means is
Mm.
if I want to appreciate you and know you, I have to know that part of me first. But if I hate that part inside of me, I'm not going to be able to love you. And so there's something really connecting about that. But within us is the capability of connecting with every other human being if we can tap into it.
Right, because we all have those six parts that we can pull on to find connection. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we see the value in it. We see the contribution of it. We see what it brings to the world and how it sees things differently. And I think that is an incredible tool for what we call cognitive perspective taking. Is
Mm.
I might not know what it feels like to be you, but I could start to anticipate how you might experience a situation because of your personality differently than I would. And that's really good to know.
And what happens, you mentioned if the part in our personality, one of those parts, we're either in denial or just not liking that part so much, would prefer that nobody know about that. And then
Yeah,
we
well, we
see
can't.
it facing us, right? This
Yeah,
happens. Of course, we know this,
yeah,
that we face ourselves all the time in the mirror. But I'm curious, how do you help someone work through that part that
yeah.
maybe they're less inclined to either accept or love.
Yeah. Well, it starts with recognizing the difference between positive and negative attention. Positive attention is getting our healthy needs met. Negative attention is when we try to get those needs met in unhealthy ways. And knowing the relationship between those two is so important. It's important for me to have structured work and know that my work is that I'm getting good work done. But when I don't get those needs met in a healthy way, then I criticize everyone else's work and I act like everyone's stupid. It's
Mhm.
so clearly two sides of the same coin. But when we can start seeing that, it's like, wait, maybe I'm dismissing the dark side of my personality, but I'm not embracing the part that needs to be cared for. So we
Mm.
help people take care of that. But also, often we just have cultural across the world. I teach this model all over the world, and different cultures value the contributions of certain types. And so if you're not that type, you really don't want to show it. You want to kind of mask it, try to show up differently than you really are, and that causes all kinds of problems. So we
Mhm.
just talk about that too.
Mhm.
Or maybe role models that have been an unhealthy version of your personality. So you don't want to be like that, but you
Mhm.
don't have the choice, but you can choose to be a healthy version of your
Absolutely.
personality.
You're touching on something really interesting there, and it's the healthy version of that personality. Because this is where differentiation comes in too, because very often our opportunity to differentiate is actually part of that hidden part that
Yes.
we're not necessarily wanting to bring forward for some reason.
Yeah.
And what I always look to is when you're thinking about that part of you that maybe is a little shy or tentative or
Yeah.
less valued, if you can attribute value to it in terms of what it contributes and why it's helpful and why it's valuable and what it can create or
Yes.
generate, then suddenly that part instead of being the troublemaker or the one that you get criticized for, right? It becomes actually a part of your
Mhm.
value proposition to the world, if you will. And you kind of release that in a healthy way, the positive energy as opposed to the negative energy. And I'm thinking more individuals here, and I'm seeing this. I would imagine you see the same thing with teams too, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I do. And you're touching on this whole idea of looking in the mirror and embracing that part that maybe
Mm,
we've been trying to hide or thinking that it doesn't have value or scared of it. In the model process communication model, we call that a phase issue. And so I've faced three in my life. The one that I had to face in order to marry my wife was the whole idea of intimacy and bonding and being able to be emotionally reliable to another human being for the long term. That is a core human competency.
yeah.
But once I looked in the mirror and embraced it, it became a superpower that allows you to have real relationships. It allows you to build a team. It allows you to lead people that trust
Yeah.
you. It allows you to not blow up every relationship that wants commitment.
Mm,
Then I had to face the issue of grief, which is this idea of I can't control everything. And sometimes things don't go my way and the plans don't manifest as I had it in my head,
mm,
or I have to face the fact that I don't actually control anything. Solving problems means you predict, you control, everything turns out like it's supposed to. Well, grief is the antithesis to that. So you don't be sad because sadness means that you lost control and that you couldn't keep it from happening,
oh,
and you didn't know it was going to happen. So my dad died, um, and he died while I was trying to start a company. And so I spent a lot of time with him instead of building a company. And so I was very resentful of him stealing all my time and ruining everything until I realized, no, I'm actually really sad. So
mm,
grieving that now becomes a superpower because I can be with people in that moment and I can have many funerals all day long when things don't go my way. And then I don't have to be a jerk. I don't have to flip people off. I
mhm,
don't have to have road rage because
mhm,
I can feel sadness. It's a superpower. My new one now is
mm,
anger because if I'm leading with the heart, then the worst thing that I can feel is anger because someone crossed me or did something I don't like or hurt someone I loved, or let me down. So now I have a new, what do you call it? Kryptonite. Um,
mhm,
and if I can handle that with healthy conflict, it becomes a superpower.
mm.
So that's the journey.
That's
for
gorgeous.
me.
Thank you for sharing that. You said, when you were talking about grief, you were saying the outcome from that that helped you was that you now can feel sadness. So that gave you the superpower. With anger, you said it's your kryptonite, but what is it that anger has given you, or your new relationship with anger,
It's
what has it given it access to?
it's a work in process. Anger, healthy assertive anger is compassionate accountability. It's being able to express that anger in a way that doesn't without blame, without becoming a victim, without attacking, but there's all kinds of other anger, passive aggressive anger, introjected, turn on myself, oh, it's just me, and then I become
Mm,
depressed. Passive aggressive anger, there's all kinds of ways that anger goes out underground. So every day I have the opportunity to choose, how do I want to be angry? um, but anger is the antithesis to relationships. It ruins harmony,
mm,
right? And so I'm
mm.
right back where I started now, which is the only way to be healthy is to be angry in a healthy way when it comes up. So it's
How
my
would
new
you,
challenge.
okay, I'm curious, would you give language to anger in a healthy way? How would you frame that?
Um, Let me see if I can think of a recent example. Um, let's say, yeah, here's a situation with a friend of mine. Let's say we're at a party and we're talking, we're having good fun with our friends, and my friend says something public that was something that was really private between us, and
Mm,
I feel exposed, and I feel
mm,
really embarrassed, and I feel angry because we had an agreement that's not okay. So then I call him the next day and I said, hey, I've been feeling really angry about what happened. The other day at the party when you said these things, I felt really exposed and embarrassed, and I thought we had agreed that we wouldn't talk about that. Um, and so it's really important to me that we rebuild that trust and that we make new commitments to each other about what's okay to talk about and what isn't. How
mm,
are you with what happened?
mm, mm. Checking in with it. So you're not just saying, you were saying how you feel embarrassed, exposed, perhaps betrayed in the loyalty that you had understood
Sure.
was there. And then not only communicating that, but you're also asking, how do you sit in this relationship that has been shifted
Well,
as a
compassion is
result of this?
struggling with, and it's a relationship. So
Yeah.
the anger should bring us closer together, not push us apart. If we think anger is going to push us apart, then it becomes our kryptonite. But if we
Mm,
can embrace it as a way to build relationships, but also get results, that's compassion accountability. Is I didn't just stop at
mhm,
saying, "Hey, I'm really pissed, dude. I can't believe you said that at the party." Then it's like I'm not taking any responsibility for my real feelings, and I'm not even
mm,
treating myself as capable of solving the problem or responsible to find a better way. That's why I don't just stop by saying I'm angry. I say, here's what happened and here's how it affected me. And then I went on to say, so where do we go from here? And
mhm,
what is the new commitment? Because I want to stay in a relationship with you. I want to trust you. I don't just
mhm.
abandon you and say, well, now I can't trust you, so I'm never going to open up again. That is so lame, right? And then I end by saying, how were you? Because we're in this together. They also
Right.
experienced that situation, and I want to know that.
Mhm. You're highlighting the importance of that two-sided part. So, what I wrote down, I don't know if it's entirely accurate, but what I wrote down was um, grief led you to understand sadness. So you went from grief to understanding sadness, which allowed you access to a whole different space of connection, if you will. Anger, you're talking about connection. Is that what I'm linking?
Yes,
Is that accurate?
anger anger is an opportunity to connect at a deeper level. And
Mm,
I would say this, I didn't invent this, but one of my mentors who actually developed the model that I teach, he said that authentic anger is one of the last barriers to intimacy.
authentic anger.
Authentic anger is one of the last barriers to intimacy. And so if we are craving more intimacy, if we feel the intimacy is limited and it could be deeper, it might be that we're not getting angry with each other in a healthy way.
Ah, so you're not allowing the conflict to give birth to the next level of connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was looking forward to this conversation so much because I fundamentally believe that conflict is access to more, just like you do. It's access
Love
to
that.
something better because that pressure point causes the points to, I always say, the pressure point causes this new birthing of something to happen. Because you just keep wrestling with it until something happens. Volcanoes and, any kind of pressure point in the world results in something different. Usually it's release, not
Yeah.
always, right?
Sand in the shell of the oyster produces a pearl.
Exactly. We see remarkable things that come from
Yep.
conflict. And when, you started us off with the earlier framing of conflict versus drama, which I think is a really, conflict has a positive energy to it. It allows for a creative and generative space, whereas drama is taking away from or removing our ability to have stronger relationships and results. So is this drama or is this conflict? That is one of my key takeaways from today, just
Yeah, and we can
reframing
measure
those two,
that. We can
right?
measure both. We have assessments that let people know exactly how much time and energy they spend in drama and how much time they spend in the positive conflict, and they know exactly what the behaviors are and the percentage of time they spend in it. Um, and you can get a ratio. You can figure out where the balance is in your life, and then you can work towards changing that if you want to. Um,
Right.
but it's easier said than done. And I really want
Oh,
to
yeah.
emphasize this. In answering your questions, I've role played some pretty sophisticated templates,
Mm,
some ways of having conflict that are they're very calculated and they're very
hmm.
practiced. And so we can't just say, hey, conflict's an opportunity. You need to embrace anger. It's like, I don't know how, because growing up,
Right.
every time anybody got angry, stuff got thrown around the house and nobody talked to each other for 3 days. So, what are you talking about? So, we
Yeah.
really have to give people very specific guidance, templates, not prescriptions, but put up the
Hmm.
guardrails so they can
Mm,
walk down a path that is scary as hell
yeah.
and come out on the other side having built something better together and saying, wait, I can do this. And it feels
Hmm.
amazing for the first time.
Of course. Well, with just speaking simply about, I'm choosing grief specifically or anger. Grief, if we feel incredibly vulnerable, so that can cause us to go into drama very quickly
Yeah.
because where protective mechanisms come
Yeah.
into place, right? Anger's the same. We feel
Yep.
betrayed and we feel unsafe generally. There's something
Mm-hmm.
about that that's challenging us. And
Yeah.
again, that'll put in protective mechanisms very quickly. Before we finish up, I haven't talked about, you talked about being emotionally reliable when you married your wife, becoming emotionally reliable. I just want to dig into that just a wee bit before we finish up, because I'm super curious. You talked about being emotionally reliable, which led you to, as you referenced earlier in the conversation, you talked about the next day you were making lists and looking at data and metrics, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
moved.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about emotionally reliable turned into data and metrics. Can you help me make that connection? Like how?
It's crazy. So, um, if we had an hour, I'd tell you the whole story. But the very, very short version is in my in my personality phase called promoter. I'm a promoter. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a go getter. I'm a lone wolf, right?
Right.
Wild stallion, whatever you want to call it. So every time I get in relationships, I'd be like James Bond. You just got to end it before the end of the movie so you can start fresh for the next movie, right? It's like catch and release kind of a thing
Mm,
because I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to be
right.
close, emotionally vulnerable, emotionally accessible, emotionally
Mm,
um, relatable. Well, a combination of events conspired for me to finally realize I have to look in the mirror. It's not about them, it's about me.
mm.
And the moment I realized that is when my heart really started to pound. It's physically very seriously pounding. I didn't know what it was. And I looked down and saw my heart pounding
You saw it.
and I saw it pounding. And I remember wondering, what's that? And
Oh
I
my
looked up and
gosh.
I told my buddy who was at the time, I said, I'm going. I got to go ask her. I'm going now. And I literally took off in the middle of the night and drove 2.5 hours in a rainstorm to Columbia, Missouri, where my wife was living. We were dating and asked her to marry me in the middle of the night because my heart had finally opened up.
Oh my gosh. I just got goosebumps.
And it's
So
crazy.
powerful.
So she said yes. And the next morning, we slept for like 3 hours. Next morning, woke up and said, we got to start planning the wedding. Da, 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 da. I immediately felt guilty for skipping class that next day. I
Oh,
never felt guilty for skipping class. I'd make it
right.
up anytime I was getting straight A's.
Yeah.
I called my professor and apologized because I had missed class. I was so responsible all of a sudden.
Oh
And it
no.
was just, I wasn't the same after that.
That's a beautiful story. Your heart was just bursting to be recognized and
It had to
felt,
come out. And it was like, it was
literally.
scary. I'm like, what is
Oh, I
this? And
love that. Oh my gosh,
uh,
that is just such a lovely place to wind us up.
yeah,
So as we're finishing our conversation today, just reflecting on the conversation we've had, we've covered a lot of territory, Nate. Um, what really stands out for you today that you would like our listeners to really hear?
I'm who I am today because people have struggled with me instead of against me. And so I would say that the greatest gift of compassion is this idea that we can be with people through hard things.
Hmm.
It's not a free pass. It's not a get out of jail free card, and it's not a bad thing. It's the life we have as humans. We're destined to struggle. The only question is, how are we going to struggle? So let's struggle together.
That is a beautiful message. Thank you for sharing. And for those people who would like to learn more about struggling together and compassionate accountability, Nate, where would they best find you and connect with you?
Anyone can Google my name, but next-element.com is the website. Everything's there. Next Element is
Okay,
our company, and you'll find it.
amazing. Thank you so much for generously sharing yourself with us today. It's been a rich and enlightening conversation. I really appreciate
Well,
you.
thanks, Michelle, and thanks for creating a space for this.
Oh, it's been fun. Thank you. And I hope we'll see you next time. Bye for now.